Hello, I'm Mary Smith, President of the American Bar Association, with another episode of the ABA Presidential Speaker Series. Under the theme Lifting Our Voices, Charting the Future, these fireside chats spotlight trailblazers shaping our collective future, inspiring thought, and fostering understanding of pressing global issues. I'm so honored to celebrate Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month with today's program, which features one of these incredible contributors, Senator Mazie Hirono, the first Asian American woman elected to the U.S. Senate. And leading the discussion today is U.S. District Court Judge Jill Otake of Hawaii. Judge Otake?
Thank you, Mary. We're so pleased and honored to welcome Senator Mazie Hirono today as part of the ABA Presidential Speaker Series. Senator Hirono was born in Japan and immigrated to the United States with her mother and her family after her mother escaped an abusive relationship. The story, Heart of Fire, in her book, tells us about those struggles that she faced as an immigrant in this country, but it also shares a lot of the beauty and joys of these islands in Hawaii, as well as the joys of being an American. Because of her book, I have a greater appreciation for what it means to be an American, for what it means to persevere, for what it means to overcome obstacles. And reading her book was an inspiration to me to make sure that I focus carefully on what I do on a daily basis that could potentially change the lives of others. Senator Hirono, thank you so much for being here today. We're so honored to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Senator, your biography is epic and impressive. If there's anything that you can think of as your proudest moment, what would it be?
Well, I continue to credit everything to my mother. I would not be doing what I'm doing if I were not an immigrant and did not watch my mother struggle and the decisions she made in her life. So that has been a huge, huge influence on me in what I do. But I am pretty positive that I would not have taken the road less traveled. That is my one and only pretty much favorite poem. But I encourage everyone to do things that are uncomfortable.
Your book, Heart of Fire, is so well written. And when I read it, I felt like I could picture you as a child growing up and what you endured and what you enjoyed. I was curious to know where your love of writing came from.
Oh, it's really, I don't know if love of writing. I have to say that I am a good writer.
You are.
I used to be the editor-in-chief of our school paper, for gosh sakes, but I did not want to become a reporter. I think I'm a good writer because I'm a good reader. And my love of reading, as you know, I had to learn to speak English. We didn't have ESL classes when I came to this country. You just get dropped into your class and sink or swim. Thankfully, when you're young, you can pick up a language. But I really think that there's a connection between love of reading and being a good writer. And I credit my librarian at Cocohead Elementary School, Miss Petrie. We would go to the library and she would read to us. And I became an avid reader. I still am. And pretty much when I interview people to work in my office, I ask them if they are readers, because in my mind, there is a definite connection between reading and being able to write clearly. And the people who who don't like to read, they usually give me lots of rhetorical stuff. There are people who think that the more words they use and the bigger words they use, that's supposed to impress me. Not at all. I look for clear thinking, presentation, and to me that comes from being an avid reader.
What books would you recommend for somebody who's maybe a young lawyer thinking about a career like yours, groundbreaking career?
I read a lot of mysteries and I read a number of books at the same time, but right now I'm very concerned about the Supreme Court. So I am reading Linda Greenhouse, Justice on the Brink. She also wrote on Becoming Justice Blackmun. She is a very well-known Supreme Court writer, and I'm reading her most recent book, wherein she pretty much says we have a Supreme Court where the justices have an ideological agenda.
How has your personal experiences and heritage, as you outlined them in your book, Heart of Fire, inspired you and guided your legislative priorities? And what do you hope readers take away from your story?
A Heart of Fire, it's also about perseverance, because that is also something that I watched my mother persevere to make our lives better. And so in the political arena, sometimes it takes a long time to get something done, and I persevere. In fact, my most recent experience is that the Congress finally passed what's known as Compact of Free Associations. This involves agreements that we have with island states, island nations, Palau, Micronesia, Marshall Islands. And these compacts go on for 20 years, and it involves so many different committees, so many different chairs in both the House and the Senate, and to restore some rights that the compact citizens who live in our country had. At one point, it took me 7 years in Congress to enable the compact citizens who live in our country to be able to qualify for Medicaid. And so perseverance. And that is something that I do. I'm very focused on what we need to do, and I just keep plugging away.
Senator, you were confident from a young age that you did not want an early marriage and motherhood. In your 20s, you went to law school on the continent rather than staying here to work with some of your male friends who are Hawaii's rising political stars. What do you think led to that decision?
It had a lot to do with my understanding that sometimes in life you should take risks. In fact, that's one of the three, what I consider the life lessons. One is one person can make a difference, because my mom changed my life by bringing me to this country. The second is half the battle is showing up, because the battles we thought we had won don't stay won, so eternal vigilance. And the third is to take risks. Yes, it would have been easier for me to go to the University of Hawaii Law School, where all my political activist friends were in the first year class. State of Hawaii had just created its law school at the University of Hawaii, but I wanted to go away to school because I thought that was really important to sort of chart a path by doing that, and I think it has made a difference. That's what I mean about doing something that is less comfortable. But then, my mother did the most uncomfortable thing, which was to have the courage to bring 3 children to this country to escape an abusive marriage. And Jill, there's nothing that I can do in my life that matches or that comes close to the courage that my mother had to do that.
Oh, that gives me chicken skin just hearing that, Senator. And I appreciate you mentioning your mother, because my next question is about her. You do talk extensively about her in your book and the influence of her resilience on your life. How does her legacy continue to influence your priorities and decisions in the Senate?
I grew up watching my mother take risks and do those things that would better our lives. So we moved every 2 years. I never stayed in one school longer than a year or two. So it was really hard to retain friends. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have a car. We came from very humble beginnings, to say the least. But my mother just took stock of what she needed to do, and she kept trying to get better jobs with better pay. And that's what she did. And when her workplace unionized, that's when we entered the middle class, because she had stability in terms of work, and she had better pay, and we were able to afford a house. That was really exciting, because we were only renting. But truly, it was my mother, and it's not as though she sat me down and said, here are the things that you should do. I learned from watching my mother that perseverance is important, and to be focused on what you do.
You also are an immigrant. How has your journey from Japan to Hawaii been an influence on you in the Senate, and how has it affected your perspective of public service and policymaking?
Well, as I said, my mother changed my life by bringing me to this country. I grew up with my grandparents on a little rice farm in a very rural part of Japan. And believe me, I never heard of Hawaii really, or I knew nothing about the United States. English is not my first language. So I come to this country, I don't know what is going on. I have no idea, but here we were. And so I did understand at a pretty early age that this country and the state of Hawaii gave me opportunities I never would have had in Japan, including being able to go to college. And so I determined pretty early on that I wasn't going to just do things that were going to make what I call my little self happy. And from a pretty early age, I wanted to do something that would help people. And I thought I'd be a therapist or a counselor. Hence, I majored in psychology in college.
Now I think would be a good time for a question from the audience. So this question is from Janelle Berger. She is a 3L at the University of Iowa College of Law, where she is co-president of the Asian Pacific American Law Student Association.
Senator Hirono, I'm an immigrant just like you who has navigated challenges of starting a new life here, and I've seen firsthand how many of my friends and family, especially those working in the service industry, lack access to information about their legal rights or face barriers accessing healthcare. So my question to you is, how are you working to better inform those communities about their rights, and how lawyers, beyond pro bono work, can help to address those issues?
Part of the kind of healthcare programs that support immigrants and people for whom English is not the first language is to make sure that all of this information is in different languages. The NHPI community represents many, many countries. We speak over 200 different languages, and so language access is important for people to find out what kind of social service support we can provide. So that is an important part of the kind of focus that I and others who understand how difficult it is for some communities to know what they can look to for help, and to make sure that we put in provisions that provide for language services. So that's just one small way that we pay attention to the needs of the diverse communities we have throughout our country. And of course, during COVID, we had these terrible attacks on AAPI communities. And so pushing for the COVID-19 hate crimes bill was an important part of my advocacy on behalf of a community that too often is seen as the other and subject to discrimination and attack.
How do you see your role evolving and continuing to champion the causes you believe in, and ensuring your voice remains a call for action and change?
Truly, it is to understand the needs of the diverse communities at a time when DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, is under attack in states like Florida and Texas and other places, that it is important to understand that we have diverse communities, diverse needs, and I just listen to those needs. I work a lot with outside advocacy groups on immigration issues, on healthcare issues, to understand that disaggregated data collection is important to know what the needs are of particular communities and to meet those needs. But really, as leaders, part of leadership is to listen, and another part is to have empathy. So by listening and through empathy, we are able to address the true needs of the diverse communities in our country.
One of the ABA's major initiatives is the Task Force on American Democracy. What can we all do, but particularly as lawyers, to help ensure trust in our elections?
I think there are going to be challenges to this election, especially, frankly, the MAGA Republicans, and Trump has already said that if the election outcome is not the way he wants it to be, then we're going to be revisited by, I would say, January 6th. So there are going to be a lot of legal challenges along the way, and the lawyers in the last election were so important to fight back and to make the argument that fraud was not occurring in our election. So that is going to continue. Then we need to fight back against all of the voter suppression, what I would call the voter suppression laws that are being enacted by too many states in our country. And so, when in Georgia, where it's illegal to give somebody standing in line to vote water, my goodness. This is how far certain states will go to make it a lot harder for people to vote. We need lawyers and others who will fight back.
We have another question. This one is from Jeremy Henry. Jeremy is a 3L at Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the Communications and Outreach Delegate of the American Bar Association's Law Student Division.
In today's political climate, what do you think the most pressing issues are with preserving democracy today?
It would help if we had a Supreme Court that adhered to precedent. That would help. But we have a majority in the Supreme Court that has been setting aside laws, the decisions that have been adhered to for decades. So the adherence to the rule of law is critical to a democracy. I think it's really important for lawyers and all of us who care about the rule of law to talk about how important the rule of law is. To me, the rule of law is what separates a democracy from other political systems. And we have people who think that the rule of law does not apply to them. So as lawyers, we have a unique opportunity. We have access to the courts. We have access to making these kinds of arguments. And I think it's incumbent upon us to accept that responsibility and to speak up. There are all kinds of issues that, frankly, the Supreme Court is not what I would consider adhering to precedent, and so eternal vigilance. The battles we thought we had won don't stay won. It is amazing that the minute the Shelby County decision was made that basically eviscerated the Voting Rights Act, some 13 states immediately enacted laws that would make put voter suppression on the books. And then, of course, after the Dobbs decision and all of the chaos that ensued and continued to ensue as a result of the Dobbs decision, these are battles we thought we had won. They don't stay won. And there's always a room for the next generation of advocates and leaders to continue the fight.
What advice would you have for young lawyers today?
Well, I hope that you care about the rule of law that is under assault in our country. I believe that democracy is under assault. So it would be great if you use your law degree to promote justice. I hope that I realize that the reality might be that you have your law school expenses to pay back, and there is also that. But I hope that you do pro bono work that will be where you can be a voice for people whose voices are not heard in our country, and there are plenty of those people. So to use our degrees in ways that will argue for and promote justice, I think that is what that would be great. You could also make a lot of money, but that never motivated me very much.
There are many young people who might be considering going to law school, but might not think that they belong there, or who might not think that they have access to that sort of education. What advice would you give to the young people who might want to become a lawyer?
I think that, for example, the state of Hawaii did not have a law school. So we now have a law school, and it's not inexpensive. No law school is, but there will be law schools that are, I think, affordable, and that is an issue, of course. So you know what? You can do a lot for our country without going to law school, but it helps. So if you're able to find a school that you can afford, do it. And especially for people who represent minority groups or women, I would encourage you, if that's what you want to do. But you should also ask, in my view, why you want to go to law school. I hope it's not because it's the next educational step to take. Law school is not easy. It's 3 years of your life, and often very expensive. And I went to law school because back in the day, there weren't that many women lawyers, and I was already very politically active. And I decided that in order for me to remain in the political arena, not necessarily to run for office, because I never thought about that as a motivating factor, but I thought that having a law degree would help me to be more effective in whatever advocacy that I was going to be pursuing. And it certainly helps to have a law degree in the arena that I am in.
It's AAPI History Month, obviously, and awareness increases around historical injustices like the history of the Japanese incarceration during World War II, and contemporary challenges such as anti-Asian hate incidents and debates over the discrimination of Asian students in college admissions. It's clear that many aspects of AAPI history and contributions are still not fully recognized. What issues within the AAPI community do you think remain underrepresented or misunderstood?
I think that all minority groups are generally viewed as the other. And so it is really important for institutions. I think of the judiciary as an institution. I think it's important that our judiciary, our judges, represent the diversity of our country. And I'm very glad that President Biden has nominated, and we have managed to confirm the majority of the President Biden's nominees have been minority. The majority of the minority have been women. And we have, for example, the first Native Hawaiian woman who is going to be serving in the Hawaii District Courts. We have a lot of firsts through Biden. So all of our institutions should reflect the diversity of our country. That would help in terms of people accepting, celebrating the diversity that we all represent. We're not there yet, of course. But part of it is that we need to get there, and every environment in which decisions are made, we should be promoting diversity.
We have another question, this time from Anna Mercado Clark, who's the president of the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association.
This year is an election year, and as millions of Americans choose their elected officials, all the way from the President of the United States to representatives on their local boards and school boards, what should voters keep in mind, particularly voters in the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community?
Votes matter, that voting matters. And voting is a habit, Jill, and that's why I very much supported Kids Vote, which involves kids in our schools learning about the actual candidates and then voting. And I have to I have to say that when I ran for governor of the state of Hawaii in 2002, there was a very active Kids Vote program, and the kids voted for me for governor. So I run into people who say to me, "Oh, I voted for you for governor when I was in third grade." And so, hey, 20 years later, I'm hopeful that they're still voting for me, but voting is a habit. That votes matter. And believe me, this is an election where democracy is on the line. If we care about a woman's right to choose, if we care about voting rights, if we care about making sure that we're not suppressing votes, it matters. And to the extent that the Supreme Court has devolved a lot of these decisions, especially in the voting area and the women's choice area, to the states, it is very critical who we're electing to state legislatures. So that also goes for school boards, where we are confronting things like book banning in states like Florida and other places where a school board can determine whether a book should stay banned. So at every level of election, it is important to express ourselves by voting. And I recently signed on to a bill that would allow schools to be places where people can register to vote. And so this is to encourage our students to register to vote, even if they're not able to vote until they're 18, and also for people in the community to go to the schools in their areas to register to vote. So any way that we can make it easier for people to vote, I support.
In your writings and interviews, you've often highlighted the ongoing struggle with invisibility faced by AAPI communities. How do you believe that we can collectively work to ensure these communities are seen, heard, and adequately represented in our national dialogue and policy decisions?
By being there, by showing up. As I said, half the battle is showing up and staying the course, because these are battles that we have to continue to fight. And frankly, the more our judges, our judiciary reflects the diversity of our country, the more our corporate decision makers represent the diversity of our country, the better it will be. And we are not there yet in terms of even women representing the corporate boards and our law firms. You know that. I don't know a single woman, for example, who has not been told, "It's not your turn. The polls show you can't win." I have been told that for most of my political life. I don't know a single woman not in politics who has not been told that you're not ready for whatever it is. So, and if you are of a minority race, for example, we just have to keep plugging away to overcome the notions that people may have about what we're supposed to be like or what we're supposed to care about.
You've been a strong proponent of laws that protect voting rights and enhance civic engagement, including proposing a bill for paid time off to vote. What other strategies do you believe are most effective in mobilizing marginalized and AAPI voters, particularly young people, to participate actively in the democratic process?
I very much support all grassroots efforts to let people know how important voting is going to be, especially in this election where democracy is on the line. How important it is to choose the local leaders, because voting rights and a woman's right to choose, these are all issues that are going to be done at the local level, thanks to the Supreme Court's decisions. And so grassroots efforts to awaken young people to the importance of becoming politically engaged. Let me tell you a story about a young person that I read about in Time magazine. Her name is Mina Fedor. She was only in 8th grade, and she was one of the featured people in Time magazine's kids issue, where they focus on young people throughout our country who are doing things that make a difference. Well, Mina is half Asian. Her mother is Asian, and she experienced a man coming up to her mother during the COVID hate crimes period. Not that that's entirely over. And this man coughed in her mother's face. Mina recognized this as a hate incident, decided to do something about it, and put together a rally to call attention to the hate crimes against AAPIs. She expected a couple of hundred people to show up. Over 1,000 showed up. She has remained in her activism, and she and other young people, she was only in 8th grade, created an organization called AAPI Youth Rising, and they are putting together curriculum, for example, that they make available to thousands of classrooms all across the country, curriculum on the history of Asians in our country. So what happened during World War II, the incarceration of Japanese Americans, the Chinese Exclusion Act. These are not necessarily a history of our AAPI and HPI communities taught, so they are making a difference. And she is now in 10th grade. But these are young people all across our country who are getting it. They're not waiting around for Congress to enact gun safety legislation or doing the things that they care about. They are doing it. And that is what keeps me going, to know that there are young people like Mina who are motivated to get things done.
Your journey includes battling and speaking openly about your stage 4 kidney cancer while in office. This personal health fight coincided with your passionate defense of the Affordable Care Act. What do you see as the next steps in ensuring accessible health care for all?
There's still going to be efforts to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And at the time that I gave my remarks on the floor, that was a moment when John McCain did a thumbs down, and that's what saved the Affordable Care Act from falling by the wayside and totally shoving over 20 million people off of healthcare. We still have to fight for access and affordable healthcare in our country. We're not there yet, and believe me, the person who's running, the MAGA person who's running, he wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Those battles continue. So we're going to need to keep pushing for the continuation of the Affordable Care Act. And again, the cost of healthcare in our country is way too high. The cost of prescription drugs is still way too high. And while we managed to finally enact being able to lower some of the prescription drug costs through negotiated prices, that's not all of the drugs. It's ridiculous how much our prescription drugs cost. So those battles continue.
Allow me to ask Marvin Dang to share his question with us. Marvin is the Secretary of the American Bar Association and the first Asian American officer of the ABA.
Aloha, Senator. Mahalo. Thank you for sharing your thoughts today. If I recall, before you first ran for public office, you had volunteered on many political campaigns here in Hawaii. Later, after you decided to run for office yourself, you were elected to the Hawaii State House of Representatives. You were a young lawyer in your early 30s. And the rest is history. So fast forward to this year. During the current election cycle, Americans are reminded about the essential connection between our democracy and our elections, and the need to protect our democracy. With all of that in mind, Senator, what do you think lawyers can do or should do during this year's election season to protect our democracy? And what advice would you give to a young lawyer who is considering running for public office?
First of all, I know that there are going to be many challenges to election results all across the country. And just as in the last election cycle, the lawyers are necessary to fight back because there is not fraud going on all across our country, but there will be attacks on election results on that basis. So we need lawyers to be able to go to court and make sure that our results are what they should be. So that's one thing. There's a lot of pro bono work that you can do in this space, and if there are election situations where people are being intimidated, for example, that could happen, and in certain states where people wanting to vote, they could be intimidated, and so you can go and volunteer. So there are just any number of things that we can do as lawyers to use our law degrees for to make sure that people can vote safely. As for running for office, well, first of all, I would ask, why do you want to do it? And it's certainly not for power or anything like that. It has to do with, in my view, having a strong sense of the ethics of the situation and to want to make a positive difference, because people in our country are getting, this is how I put it to my staff, people in our country get screwed every single second, minute, hour of the day. And if by our collective effort we can lessen that number, we will be doing our jobs, we'd be making a difference. And you can do that in an elected office. But of course, get your head on straight before you run for office. I'm not saying anything about you because I served with you, Marvin, and you were always very caring and reasonable. But at the same time, I understand your district, listen to your people and know what their concerns are and be on their side. That's what I seek to do. I'm on the side of my constituents. They may not know what I'm fighting for, but they know that I'm fighting for them.
What advice would you have to people who want to work in a bipartisan fashion? There is so much in the news now that is about the divisions, and I'm curious to know what ways would you recommend people find common ground?
These large ideological issues like a woman's right to control her own body, that we may not be able to get too much support from the across the aisle, but there are many other issues that we can work together. For example, I serve on the Armed Services Committee, and the major bill that we put through is called the NDA, National Defense Authorization Act, very bipartisan. It massively, it is the way that we tell the Department of Defense what the priorities should be, et cetera. So that is generally a bipartisan bill. Most of the bills that I work on, I ask my staff, please find a Republican co-sponsor. And so we do. And you can find people to co-sponsor bills that I work on. And in fact, the COVID-19 hate crimes bill, my major co-sponsor was Susan Collins, Republican Senator of Maine. And without her working with me, it would have been that much more challenging, because when I first introduced that bill, I could not get a single Republican to sign on to it. But when the bill came finally to a vote on the Senate floor, every single person voted for it except for one Republican senator, Josh Hawley. So you can work across the aisle.
My final question, Senator, is, amidst all of the divisions in the country, do you have hope for us? And where do you find that hope?
I have hope because one, there are like-minded people like me who are plugging away here, but also I know that I mentioned Mina Fedor. She's now in 10th grade, and there are so many others like her who are doing what they can to influence what's going on in their states. So we have to keep going, because now is not the time to be giving up. Now is not the time to succumb to saying, "Oh my, I'm fed up with everything." Really, come on, buck up, everybody. The battles continue. You may as well be in it. One of the things that I think is really important is that in a time when there's just so much crises and challenges, and it can be depressing. You know what I mean? It's not like I don't feel like what the F, right? So it's really important for me to do things that are creative and to do things that are fun, that are engaging. It's very important for me to be doing things that are right brain. And so I do artsy things. That is why I have in the background my crane installation. I have a very big wall in my office. And during my, I'm still being treated for cancer, by the way, but a lot of people sent me cranes that in my culture, when you fold 1,000 cranes, the kami-sama, the gods will grant you a wish. So people come to visit me, they fold cranes, and I have an installation in my office. And that's part of the cultural diversity that I promote in the Senate. But I'm constantly encouraging people, what do you do for fun? We have to maintain an equilibrium. So that is what I would encourage everybody to do. Listen to podcasts like Happiness Podcasts. That's what I do. So one of the really fascinating things that I'm getting to do now is to experience some of the cultural creative people that we have in Hawaii. And there is a person who makes bark cloth from trees. Well, okay, there's a certain tree. And so I had the experience of going to visit a bark cloth master who had been named by the National Endowment for the Arts as one of our master artists. And she, I went to visit with her on the Big Island, and we made bark cloth. It was fascinating to me. So those are some of the things that I want to bring to light. And that's why I make my own paper, for example. I've always been interested in creative, artisanal things.
Senator, let me ask you, how do you find time to have fun?
Because otherwise I would be kind of depressed. So I make my own paper, I make cards. I carry on my mother's card making tradition, but I think about what it is that I need to do for myself to maintain an equilibrium. I watch other programs. I watch NHK a lot, where one of my favorite programs is a Zero Waste Life. All these people in Japan who don't waste anything because we have too much waste, environmental and the consumption waste in our country. And it's helpful to know that there are just regular people in Japan who want to not waste anything, and I enjoy watching those kinds of programs. But it's to maintain equilibrium. And I follow Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the Buddhist monk who very much focused on mindfulness. And whatever we're doing, the Thich Nhat Hanh is not somebody who thinks that we should just be doing multiple things, multitasking. That is not something that he would expound. He would say we should be mindful of what we're doing. We should be aware of what we're doing. And so I get up in the morning and I try to mindfully drink my first cup of coffee, as opposed to going through all my emails and everything else. And just, hey, how's about taking 10 minutes to mindfully enjoy your cup of coffee?
Thank you, Senator, for being so open with us today. I always treasure your wisdom and the opportunity to learn from you. I appreciate that it takes some vulnerability to speak in settings like this, and I want to thank you for giving us that gift. Thank you again. Back to you, Mary.
Thank you, Judge Otaki, and thank you, Senator Hirono. Let us use this month to not only honor the achievements of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, many of whom overcame great hardship and discrimination to reach their goals, but also to dedicate ourselves to building bridges across cultures to create a future where all are treated equally and can succeed. And consider joining the American Bar Association at ambar.org/membership. Thanks so much for joining us.